Hello and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoons, the weekly podcast that revisits, reviews, and ridicules some of the world's weirdest animated series. Coming to you from the planet Z, I'll be your host, Dave Drumbore. Joining me as always, he's one of the ancient Zoidians, my co-host, Sean Paul Ellis. How's it going, sir?
David. I'm doing well, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm curious. I've always wanted to know, what's it like to be an ancient Zoidian?
It's pretty cool. You know, I put my Zoid pants on like everybody else does, naked, covered in a bunch of wires.
Oh, okay.
So,
well,
yeah, it should be very relatable to everybody.
Yeah, not what I expected. Kind of came out of left field, but that's
fair enough.
in fitting, I think, with tonight's episodes that we watched. This is going to be another listener suggestion. Listeners out there, if you are familiar with the Planet Z or the word Zoidians, you can probably figure out we're going to be talking about another entry in the Zoids franchise, Zoid's Chaotic Century. Now, this one's kind of interesting. Sean and I were just talking about how when we covered Zoids, we got a lot of love from you guys about the fact that we covered the show, but you were just like, look, you guys, you done fucked up. You really need to go watch this other series instead, because the one you watched is not good.
You guys had very strong opinions about New Century, Zoid's New Century, and so we wanted to honor your suggestions to dig in a little bit to Chaotic Century.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing that we did too. I'm glad you guys suggested it. I'm glad we listened to you because I really enjoyed this one. But before we get too much into that, Sean's going to take it away with a little bit of the history of this series.
Sure. Zoid's Chaotic Century, simply titled Zoids in Japan, is the first of 4 anime series based on the Zoid range of mecha model kits produced by Tomy. It is loosely adapted from the manga series Kiju Shinsheki Zoido, which was created by Mishihiro Uyama and published by Koro Koro Comics. The series was animated by Zebek and aired from September of 1999 to December of 2000 on the TBS network. Although the first series to be produced for the franchise in Japan, Chaotic Century was the second series to be dubbed and aired in Western nations following Zoid Century. So if there was some confusion why Zoid's New Century made more sense as an American audience, and why it kind of felt like there was maybe a little bit of a disconnect in terms of the history of this show, or you were somebody who was like, I don't really care about the history of this show, just show me these tigers with blades on the side of them. That's why. So American audiences, we got New Century first, and then we got Chaotic Century much later.
Yeah, which kind of confused me because when we went and we watched the last Zoids episode that we talked about, to me, that was the first one I had ever seen. So to me, that was like the first one. And right. I didn't actually watch Chaotic Century because by the time that came out here, I just don't think I was just watching that series. Like I was okay with the Zoids that we talked about. I remember Jamal, this was one of the shows that he like would watch right up until the last second. His like school bus came at like 7:29 and he had to run out the door. It was kind of the same thing for me, but just not that quite that urgent. But then this series, I don't remember watching at all, and it's unfortunate because it's superior. I mean, just from watching the couple episodes that we watched, like vastly superior.
Yeah, it seemed like for this, it seemed like Zoid's New Century was very focused on battles of the week.
Right.
And for Chaotic Century, it felt like there was an actual narrative arc, or there were multiple arcs that kind of went through a lot of the episodes that we watched for this evening. And so that felt more rewarding as an audience member because it wasn't just, did the person who's in a liger, destroy the person who obviously and predictably they're going to.
Right.
This felt like it had a much grander vision in mind when you were watching the show.
Right. And actually, off of that, let me walk you guys through the synopsis of this series here. So Zoid's Chaotic Century is set in the far reaches of the Milky Way on a planet Z, spelled Z-I. On Z, there are metallic life forms known as Zoids, which possess powerful fighting capabilities. Throughout the recent history of the series, Zoids have been used as weapons in an ongoing war between the Healic Republic and the Gylos Empire. Now, if you'll remember when we watched Zoid, since it actually came after this series, like Sean was just talking about, the battles were only just for fun. They were just like tournament battles. There were no warring sides involved with either of the factions, so it was just kind of like, what's the point?
And here, in this series,
yeah,
battle is life.
That's right. In this series, it's straight up just like warfare. Like there are skirmishes and stuff so Chaotic Century is actually set during a ceasefire for a few years after the most recent war. And although tensions are high after it is revealed that one or both sides may have access to the ancient technology of the ancient Zoidians. So the ancient Zoidians, this all sounds kind of crazy right now. Ancient Zoidians are basically like the original inhabitants of this planet that lived kind of like side by side with these Zoids, right? we don't get too much into that mythology here. But if you delve into the series, like 67 episodes, they obviously dig much deeper into that. So this particular series follows the story of a kid named Van Flyheight, a teenage boy who discovers a mysterious girl named Fiona and an organoid named Zeke. Van discovers that Zeke has the ability to merge with a Zoid, increasing its fighting power. As they travel across the Helic Republic, a new war breaks out, with the group of travelers being caught in the middle of it. So we actually, for tonight's episode, we watched the opening for the series, which is just called The Boy from Planet Z. And we also watched the finale, which is called Return to Another Tomorrow. Now, I think that was a good idea because it allows us to, see a little bit of the transition, see where they started, how much really changed over the course of the 67 episodes. What we didn't expect, I think, is just how much of it just like a cold, like ice water to the face, like watching the first episode and then jumping into that finale, because it's just like, holy shit, there's a lot that we missed, which is obvious.
It was a very stark contrast between the two shows, between these two episodes.
Well, yeah, definitely between the two shows, and then also, between the two episodes. But I think it was good because it made me want to watch all that stuff that was in the middle. Like, I really like what they did with the first episode. I really liked how they finished everything up. And it made me want to go back and watch what happened, what transpired throughout the middle. Because there's obviously going to be stuff that we missed, but you get the general feeling of the plot.
Right.
But before we get into the plot of tonight's episode, we like to start things off with a discussion of the theme song. Now, in this case, Sean, you watched both the Japanese version and the American version, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. The American version
okay.
is...
You have to wonder sometimes, and I know I've said this before, is that whenever they make, maybe it was X-Men the Animated Series, or maybe it was when we watched Zoid's New Century, the American version for some of these theme songs is, what do they think that we just like the title of the show chanted over and over again with like death metal in the background?
I mean, I guess it seems to
because
to work.
I kind of don't hate it.
Oh, really? You don't hate it?
I don't really hate it. It's just a lot of like sweet hot guitar licks and just Zoids like in the background.
That's literally all it is. It's just somebody chanting Zoids over and over.
I was, when I watched these episodes, I watched the Japanese language intro first,
right.
And I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. For some reason, for me, it had a very Mad Max style feeling to it. There's a lot of desert. They're sort of walking.
Oh yeah, visually, yeah.
They're looking very longingly. So, Mad Max with a little bit of Dawson's Creek in the middle and no lake. And so we
plus
have
metal creatures just wandering through like metal dinosaurs and giant tigers. Yeah.
So we have Van kind of looking longingly at these different things, and then we kind of are given like a very quick idea of who these villains are going to be. And do you know how I know that they're villains? Because they all have darker shades on their clothing, or their organoid that they have that's with them is a darker and
it's just scowling all the time.
Right. It's just this metal just looks angry,
just
nonstop.
Angry metal.
And so it's kind of fun. The theme song was, for me, it was enjoyable, but it was very kind of like standard coming into an anime series with somebody singing in the background, and it's a lovely song, and the visuals that they present are very cool, and they set like a decent tone. To contrast that then with the American version, again, we've mentioned the stark contrast between these different shows and then the episodes that we watched tonight. This was a stark contrast to me too, because it was much darker in tone. There were not a lot of light colors. Like, it almost seemed like it was just explosions and just things blowing up, and then followed by those guitar licks and like just like
the Zoids chant that was almost like a military chant. Yeah. No,
it kind of was like 1984 2-minute hate style of just like screaming Zoids.
Thankfully, it was only like weird. 30 seconds, whereas the Japanese one was like almost like a full song. It was 1 minute and 30 seconds long.
Right.
I appreciated the Japanese version way more so than the American one. The Japanese version was it was a nice song. It didn't really matter that it was in Japanese. It didn't really feel like it was a very memorable song to me. Like, I couldn't tell you what the melody was or what any of the hooks were right now. It was just like a very nice, melodic, kind of instrumental, there were lyrics too, but just kind of like a nice flow to the song. I remember checking out on the YouTube page just like the different versions of them. And on the first comment under one of the Japanese versions is like, beautiful instrumental music with and then links to like some of the other outros and stuff. And then American, he's like, and then the American version is just like Zoids, and he's like punches you in the face, drums, heavy guitar. It's pretty much all it is. So it's a very stark contrast between the two. I thought the Americanized one was garbage. I liked the Japanese one, but I didn't think it was anything like, it wasn't going to be one of my favorite songs that I ever listened to.
Neither was really a particular
No.
earworm for me.
No.
They, the Japanese version, as you said, did a decent job setting the tone, for everything that was about to happen, and then the American version was just, it was like a cartoon uppercut.
Yeah, it's just welcome to America. Here's what we've done to your beloved cartoon. I do like that both of them had like a good introduction to the visual style of the show and the characters, though. So both of them, you get to see Van, you get to see some of the enemies, some of the other human characters that show up, but you also get to see the difference. If the human characters are drawn sort of like traditionally hand-drawn 2D animation, all the ligers and the organoids are kind of this computer-generated 3D quality to them. It's a very distinct quality on screen at the same time, but they do a good job of showing that in the intro as well. So as far as that goes, it's like, okay, I got it. There's people, they are partnered up with these creatures, and they're fighting against each other. That's pretty much all I need to know. And I think both versions did fine setting that up.
Yeah.
But since we talked about the characters, what did you think of the character design, both for the humans and the Zoidians and the Zoids themselves and the Organoids? There's a lot of weird terminology here.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. So I'm going to preface this saying I felt that a lot of the character animation felt very... It had its distinguishing moments, but it felt very generic for me.
Okay.
It felt very standard. The thing that they used to really kind of separate a lot of these characters amongst each other are sort of decorative makeup or like red lines or painting that they would have on their face.
Yeah, just like weird facial markings.
And it's a style choice, and
Sure.
It looks fun. The first thing that I thought of is I was like, why is everybody wearing like a Nelly face Band-Aid?
Yeah, exactly.
It didn't make a ton of sense to me.
It looked like one of those waterproof like kids beach Band-Aids that like for whatever reason they're like the bright neon colors, but they're waterproof, so you just like put them on.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess because, as you mentioned, Dave, that you didn't really watch this show, I didn't either.
Right.
And so I've watched other anime series, and I think the one that it kind of, for a lot of the military characters and some of the other characters, the thing that it closely resembled for me was Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, I could definitely see that with like the way that they have like the epaulets on the jackets, and they have like the like the heavy leather jackets and canvas, a lot of canvas stuff. But it's weird because it's set in a desert too. So I had it kind of like there was that combination like the military style, but with kind of like a Star Wars aesthetic almost.
Okay.
There's kind of like everybody's like kind of like draped in like a lot of fabrics because they're out in the desert, but so nothing like too super fancy. I don't know. It was kind of a different aesthetic.
Yeah.
What do you think about the Zoids though, and the Organoids and all those characters that we got a chance to see? Because we got to see a good variety of them, which was actually kind of nice.
I liked the Zoids. I will say it makes more sense now watching Chaotic Century that a lot of the specific styles or creature types that they have, such as the liger, and we saw a character named Raven that had a raptor that had a ton of guns that were on it, and so the raptor liger combination, it's kind of interesting to see that in further in the series.
Yeah, and the command wolves too were introduced to them earlier on, and like this weird scorpion thing. Guy Zach, I think.
Right. We saw a lot of really, really cool ones, in the final episode.
Yeah.
That were great. That really kind of made me think like, oh, like there is a really large military presence in this. Like these are sort of like they're AT-ATs, that they have that are kind of to go with the Star Wars reference that you made, Dave. These are giant, all-terrain, huge. I think it sort of looked like a brontosaurus at one point.
It looked almost like Dino Riders. Like it looked like the good guys. I can't remember the Valerians. I can't remember what their names were now. Valorians. Remember they had like the brontosaurus with like the big shell on its back, which was like their mobile headquarters. It looked similar to that. Yeah.
And so we had that in Zoids, and I believe the name was Ultrasaurus.
I believe so, yeah.
Which is the giant guy that they had, and they had everybody that was in there. And in the final episode, when you see these things, as we've mentioned, understanding and figuring out like where these things came from in terms of the progression of the series, these are cool things. Like these are interesting things that I would love to kind of see what the genesis or where they were introduced along the lines.
Yeah, it was definitely something that like just from watching these two episodes, I was really involved with like It took me back to that feeling when you're a kid where you're just like, whoa, I would love if like I just wandered outside one day and found like this organoid thing that let me pilot these giant. It was great. And I mean, it was a great feeling to just be like, okay, I get why people are so like into this. I can totally understand it. The one thing that I'll say that like New Century may have had over Chaotic Century, and probably the only thing, is that you got to see the progression of like Liger Zero. He used to go, Liger Zero would go from like Liger Schneider and like Liger Panzer, and he had all these different like
armor
skill
types
sets
that would
and
go on top of him.
Exactly, that he could like, you could pull him off from the base Liger and then suit him up to different things. And this one, I was surprised that the Liger that we see in the first episode is like the exact same Liger that we see in the last one, just like they've been together for 67 episodes. So that was surprising to me. That might be the only thing that I think New Century might have on them. But man, I love the design of these Zoids. I didn't quite get the mechanics of how an organoid, which is sort of a Zoid, but not one that you pilot. It's kind of like its own sentient Zoid.
Well, you did have a great analogy in our discussion of this show about what the organoid sort of is to the actual Zoid.
Oh, do I? Because I already forgot it.
Oh.
Please tell me what I said.
Sure thing. This was the genius that you delivered earlier,
Wonderful.
Dave, was that these organoids sort of act as batteries for the Zoids themselves.
I don't even remember saying that, but yeah, it's basically what they did.
And so we have this moment where we're introduced, and our hero's journey that we have with Van, he's introduced, as we're introduced to him, and he discovers this ancient ruin.
Right.
And
he's just straight hoverboarding through a desert like normal.
Yeah, like you do. And
just Marty McFly his way through the world.
He comes across this ruin that he's come across 100 times before, and he gets trapped and he gets stuck because of a battle and somebody that's chasing him. And
one of these a-hole bandits.
Yeah. And so he stumbles upon a new part of the ruin, and it allows him access to an organoid that we find for the first time. And this was an interesting idea because my impression, or at least my idea, when we got the response from Facebook that we did about this show, was that an organoid was sort of like a human Zoid, sort of like a human Zoid hybrid. And so I didn't know really what it was until suddenly he opens up this pod, and I think to myself like, oh, there's gonna be this weird thing. Actually, from the theme song, I thought it was the guy that had like the 3 lenses
the
over his eye patch.
Like bullet eye, whatever that was. Yeah.
And so I thought it was gonna be him initially.
I thought it was gonna be like Outlaw Star, where Outlaw Star they like open up, or even from like Firefly, they like open up this case, and there's a naked girl.
It's just Summer Glau.
It's just Summer Glau. So that's like a common thing, I think, in anime and my dreams, where you just open up a case and there's like this naked girl just like curled up in there. I thought it was going to be something like that, and I wasn't too far off, just not right out of the gates, right?
Right. So I set all of this up not just to explain the plot, to explain
it's a good segue though, because
we have this idea where we're introduced to Zeke, and so I kind of wanted to. What were your initial impressions or feelings about Zeke?
So there's a lot in this.
Ooh, there's a deep sigh.
Well, it's because
you pulled back for a moment there, buddy.
I did. It's because there's a lot in this episode that it's flavored by like the Americanization of it, right?
Sure.
So a lot of the dialogue is just like stilted and off. Unfortunately, the voice acting does not get a whole lot better by the final episode, so that was a little disconnecting for me. If I would go back and watch more of these episodes, I'd probably just watch them in Japanese. There's this. You're introduced to Zeke earlier on in the intro, so you know that this like roughly 6 foot tall silver robot, dinosaur robot, is going to be like probably a pretty important part of the thing. So I kind of expected him to hatch when Van found him. The whole explanation, and this goes into the plot, which we're kind of in the middle of anyway for the first episode, so I think it's fine. But the naming convention. So Van names this guy Zeke because apparently that was his dad's Zoid's name. And his dad had died, I think, 5 years previous to this day?
Correct. And so there's a lot of tragedy that they inject.
Oh, and they just straight up exposition this by like a priest on a hill in a cemetery. I'm not even making that up.
Standing in front of a grave in a grave site, and Van's sister is in the graveyard screaming for her brother.
Well, I'm assuming she went there because she knew he would be there on the day of like their father's passing, the anniversary of his father's
passing. Did she though? Because she seemed shocked that there were flowers that were on the gravestone.
Yeah, like I said,
on the gravesite.
I think it's the lost in translation stuff, because it was just like that transition that they made didn't make a whole lot of sense, and it hopefully made a little more sense in Japanese.
Right. So we get a little bit of this wonky exposition where, and again, as harshly as we could judge this for these dubbings or these Americanizations, it's still kind of funny because these moments where the priest is like, "Don't you know? It's the 5th anniversary of when your father passed away," and she's like, "Oh."
She's like,
did you not know?
Weren't you paying attention when your dad died? Yeah.
Oh, has it been that long? Like, come on.
And it was so confusing too because it's out of nowhere. So your only introduction to Van is just like him, Marty McFly across the desert, chased by a giant scorpion with a dude inside. You're just kind of like, all right, I'm in for this ride, whatever's happening. And then he's in this ruin which starts collapsing, and then he goes back into the ruin after collapse. Whole nother craziness there. But then it literally just jumps from like that to like this grass-covered hillside that's also a cemetery with this random girl with like another weird mark on her face, just like screaming for Van. And at this point, you don't know that the kid's name is Van. So she's just screaming Van into space for no apparent reason. And then this weird, creepy dude comes up behind her and she turns and says something like something father. So I was like, well, what the fuck? Like, is it her dad? And then once they show a close-up of him, it's like, oh no, I guess he's like a version of a priest. It was the dialogue choices and the editing cuts were just like weird, and it was a little stilted, and it took a little bit to get used to it, but they do a good job, and by good job I mean they just dump exposition on you at this point. But that's it, and we never go back to them, which I'm totally fine.
I want to say that for all the times that we kind of come down and crap on these translations and how these things are dubbed and how they're edited together for an American audience, I'm beginning to love and truly appreciate how awkward you can make a basic conversation with one other human being become. That should be a normal transactional, like, hey, how are you? I'm doing fine. That's great. Talk to you later. They make it so fucking creepy. And whenever it happens, I'm just like, I had a friend who used to say, like, in movies when you would see somebody like walk into a bathroom and they turn on the faucet and then they'd splash some water in their face. And then they towel off. He goes, I've never seen another human being ever do that in my life.
I've been a human being that's done that after like a long flight.
So have I.
But that's pretty much it. But I've never seen people do it.
But he was like, I've never seen another person do this. I've seen like dozens of people in bathrooms do this. Okay. And I guess maybe it's just
he just lives in like a low stress environment, I guess.
Yeah, really. Yeah, maybe it's just it's circumstance and location, geography, and the type.
Sean and I just spent a lot of time in dudes' bathrings.
Just hanging out in bathrooms, just washing my face.
What else is there to do?
But God, it's like for one of these things, it's something that seems so basic, that you wouldn't really have that exposure to, or you really wouldn't have those interactions, and they just really just ratchet it up to a level where you're like, do people actually converse this way?
Look, and I get it.
This isn't really what happened.
It's like, look, it's bad enough and hard enough to write an episode where you have to cram this exposition in so that the audience gets it. But now the American team has to take the pre-existing Japanese animation and dialogue, right? So the characters are quote unquote saying Japanese words in their pre-existing animation. So now we like I wrote it. The American team has to they have to choose English dialogue that is cut and formed in the same way to make it look like the characters are still speaking it. I mean, honestly, there's a little bit of leeway. They probably don't care all that much about being that accurate. But they have to cut it in such a way and write it in such a way that it not only makes sense, but it looks like the characters are actually speaking it. Does that make sense? Am I even making sense at this point?
No.
So, I mean, I totally get it when they're just like, let's cut to Maria at a cemetery, and then the priest behind her tells her that her father died 5 years ago, and Van's
somebody's
looking
like,
for
what if Maria gasps? Like, what if she's like,
Meanwhile, in Japan, she actually said something like, I wonder where Van is. But in America, she's just like,
or she just looks at the priest and just goes, yeah, no shit. I'm his daughter. Yeah, he died. He's my father. Yeah. I'm familiar.
Yeah. Which is why sometimes their facial expressions don't match up, because they can look like be scowling and stuff, but their voice is like this and like everything's great. And there's just something off in this series about it, but it's not that big of a deal. I don't want to scare you guys off.
No, I'm just really coming to appreciate how awkward they can make these moments.
Super awkward.
Thank you. Thank you, English language dubbing team.
I'm just a priest in a cemetery telling you when your dad died and letting you know that your kid brother wants to find a Zoid. All right, see you later.
So this is really like our whole introduction to
Yeah.
Zeke,
Yeah.
and learning a little bit more about Van's backstory and sort of why it's so important, or why he feels the need to become a pilot and meet an organoid, which it seems that it's a very rare occurrence to actually come across, stumble, and find one of these organoids.
So not just that. So apparently they make this kind of like offhand comment that I guess during the wars they used these Zoids to fight against each other, right? So during the ceasefire, a lot of the military Zoids are either still under military control, or some of them have escaped into the wild and they're what's known as like stray Zoids.
Right.
So there are stray Zoids that are out there, but they're not super refined. They're not super powerful. They're just kind of like your run of the mill. They're like your basic level Pokemon, right? I actually compared a lot of Van's discovery of Zeke and their first like battle together and their first interactions to Ash and Pikachu. It's almost like frame for frame the exact same thing. It's kind of weird when you sit down and think about it. But so out in the world there are stray Zoids, which are just kind of like random ones that escaped from the military. But then there's also the wild Zoid, which for the most part are disabled, are just basically like covered in rust and sand, and they haven't moved in probably decades, if not like centuries.
Because I thought you were gonna say that like wild Zoids were just like, hey, we're Zoids and we're here to party.
Yeah, just
here to get
party
crazy.
Zoids. You can't
Party
trust those guys.
Zoids.
Can't trust those guys. You gotta call the cops on
Zoids. Zoids Party Century. Oh, 100-year party.
I'd watch that. Zoids Gone Wild. I'd watch it.
Oh no.
Well, some of these episodes get a little
racy.
Yeah, surprisingly. But I thought it was great that in this first episode, when Van runs into the ruins, he not only passes by the kind of like the shell of the liger, you can actually see it. Like he passes by it. Doesn't he also pass by like this giant Godzilla-looking Dinobot too? Is that what we see later on, or at least a version of it?
It might be.
I think
could be.
Is. We'll get to that when we talk about the finale. I just wanted to bring that up now because it was a really nice foreshadowing of like, oh shit, this thing also exists and will come to life later on. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, or at least maybe it was a hieroglyph or something like that, or something that was etched into the side of the mountain to sort of denote or say, hey, this is what this thing looks like.
Either one.
Be on the lookout for what is it?
Giant Mecha Godzilla.
Death Sore.
Yeah. Keep an eye out for this thing that's bigger than a skyscraper, so you literally can't miss it. But no, I thought it was great. So in Pokemon, which we talked about not too long ago, right? Ash wants to go get his very first Pokemon so he can become the greatest Pokemon trainer. In this show, Van wants to go find a Zoid so he can be a great Zoid pilot like his dad and defend, his family, his town, his village. So right there, you're set up kind of the same thing. Ash gets his Pokemon given to him. Van kind of finds his in like a different kind of circumstance. But then neither of the two get along with each other when they first meet. So I love the interaction between Van and Zeke in the first episode because it was just kind of like it was a little weird, a little silly, but I like the bond that they kind of forged. What was your take on it?
Well, I think any bond that you forge by tail slapping somebody who hatched you out of a pod, that's going to create a long-lasting, solid relationship between you and the other person. Yeah,
I just think that's common courtesy, and on the planet Z, you just tail slash somebody in the face.
But this is what happens: is that Zeke has all of this exposition about how you're an organoid and I've found you and we're going to be best friends and we're going to do all these things and I can't believe that I found you and I hatched you and let's go do some stuff.
He's so excited. It's like his dream come true.
And then Zeke, and that's what it is. It's that dream come true moment where he's like, let's be cool and let's hang out. Yeah. And then Zeke just tail bitch slaps him right in the fucking face. But I'll be honest, Van recovers like a champ.
Oh, he's not even, his face didn't even swell up or nothing. He's fine.
Nothing.
He gets that like shadow look for a second, but then he's like, no, we're good.
He's like, nah, we're cool.
We're good.
Cool.
I get it. I mean, I just woke you up. You're probably a little cranky.
But then we're brought into the circumstances of the main antagonist for this episode, where we have this giant scorpion Zoid that breaks through and begins attacking them.
Piloted by a straight up jerk named Bull.
Yeah, Bull.
I think they're basically just bandits, right? So there's three of them. Right. There's Bull, who was not good enough of a pilot to get a Zoid back at like their training camp, and then there's these other two named Nero and Bianco, who are piloting
Yeah.
Command Wolf. What were you going to say?
The interesting parallel that I want to draw from New Century and Chaotic Century is that there is so much emphasis put on proving yourself as a pilot.
Right. And on your Zoid itself. So there's like a
Right.
prestige to what you're piloting and how well you can pilot it. Yeah.
And so it's sort of interesting to kind of see that come through with Bull.
Bull.
What a terrible name.
I like that Zoid though too. That was a pretty badass Zoid. Even though
that was a cool.
He didn't like it. He was just like, well, I just found this stray Gyzax, whatever the fuck. And then he's just like, but I'll show those guys that even I can make something worthwhile. This piece of shit is basically what he said. Paraphrasing.
And then he just gets head-butted by Zeke.
But there's a great moment, right? So again, it's like, do you remember when we watched Ash and Pikachu battle the main villain, which was not necessarily the landscape, but the flock of Spearows, right?
Yeah.
So in that, there's a flock of Spearows that are attacking him, and Ash tries to protect Pikachu by like fighting him off, but he gets knocked out, and then Pikachu, after being injured, just like lightning blasts all of this flock, right? So that's their bond. That's how they forge a bond together. They defend each other, protect each other, and sacrifice their own safety for each other. Almost
and
like,
I want to.
Yeah, go ahead.
I almost want to point out, as you're continuing with this, that sacrifice is a really important thing in this show.
Yes, which is great. I think that's actually what makes a lot of these shows. It adds to the stakes, especially in the finale, which we'll talk about. Like the stakes literally don't get any higher in this finale, and I think that's the only way to do it. So in this one, yeah, you've got this giant metal scorpion that's ruining the place, and you've got kind of Van, and he's got no weapons. He's got his smarts because he actually grabs like an electrical cable and zaps the scorpion thing with it, and it stuns him long enough that he tells Zeke to get the hell out of there. But Zeke sees that he's trying to defend him, and then Zeke attacks the scorpion once Van gets knocked aside. But this thing is way bigger than Zeke. Zeke's like just hatched. He doesn't really have a lot of power yet, so he kind of gets knocked to the side too. There's this cool moment where both of them each kind of like, they each do that thing where they've like been knocked out, but they keep getting up and they go back into the fight and they keep trying.
Right.
And then what happens when, this is what you're saying, when the scorpion is knocked out by Zeke's special power.
So at some point in this battle, Zeke leans over, grabs Van, throws him on his back, and then has these giant turbo thrusters that pop out of his shoulder, his dino shoulder blades, and propel him at an alarming rate, which doesn't seem like it would be very safe for Van because he's not really protected at all.
No,
and
I thought
smashing into another giant piece of metal.
Yeah, I thought they were just gonna fly away and like escape. He's like, no, he just straight rockets right through this thing.
I honestly just thought that Van was gonna get like his head totally just
shredded,
like, chopped off,
just completely shredded,
decapitated.
Yeah.
But they end up pushing through, this giant scorpion Zoid, and they throw him out of the ruin.
Yeah.
And in the process, Van's like, where the fuck are we going? And in this moment, you realize sort of the battery analogy that you've made, Dave, is that suddenly they drop Van into this liger, this
right
rusted, right, this rusted, wild, ready to party Zoid, and suddenly Van's like, well, what the fuck am I going to do with this? This thing's old and it's not going to party.
Yeah.
And then suddenly Zeke just like flashes in a beam of light and kind of, I don't know how they do this, but he just like, because they never really show how the attachment or sort of what
and Zeke just like teleports. In the 2 episodes we watched, he's all over the place. He's like, he's turning into energy beams. He's teleporting. He's weirdly turning into like
a server room with just a bunch of like
just
cables,
a bunch of cables
all over
coming
the
out of
place.
him. There's a lot of weird stuff going on with Zeke.
Just spilling them cables.
But yeah, this was a cool moment though too, right? Where they plug in. Zeke is basically just like, I got you, bro, and he just like brings the shield liger to life. And now Van, he not only like achieved his lifelong dream of finding an organoid, he's now piloting a pretty badass Zoid himself.
Yeah.
And now this is where the other bandits, the bad guys, come in. The command wolves, they fly in and like try to take on the liger. They're like, that's a shield liger. That's a super advanced Zoid. There's no way this pathetic little punk kid could pilot it. And as they're saying that, like, fucking Van just like takes off and just like rips their guts out basically with one strike.
Right.
It was a little anticlimactic, I will give you that. That he basically just like scrapes the top of them. They say like, oh, my command my combat function's
My-
disabled. He's like, yeah, mine too. Let's get the fuck out of here.
It's just great that they show the console and they show the console and the console just simply says like caution.
Yeah.
It's got like a
"Ooh,
big
I don't know."
blinking red light in their face. They're like, "Ooh, it's broken.
Get out of here.
Let's run away."
You guys are the worst.
So, but it is a very anticlimactic finish. But
It was, but I thought it was a great setup as a first episode, and we're not done yet.
yeah, it's not, because this is what makes the end of this episode rewarding, is that they go back into the ruin because Zeke's like, I got more weird shit to show you.
Yeah. He's like, and you're going to
Let's
come with
check
me.
out
I'm
and
going to
see what's
smash you in the
here."
face with my tail again. You know it's good for you.
So they go back into this ruin, into the same room where Zeke was, and there's another pod, like a smaller pod
Mhm.
that's next to him.
And Van's
And
super
who-
excited.
And oh boy, Van, this is like, as you've mentioned, this is his dream come true. This is like double dream come true for him.
And we should mention, too, that when one of the bandits saw this organoid earlier, he was just like, oh, an organoid. I'm totally going to sell that for a lot of money. So these
Yeah.
are like super rare things that everybody wants. And now Van thinks he has 2 of them.
Right. So he is pumped. And
Ready
he is
to
standing behind this
party.
control, ready to party. And so he is just like, he can't wait. He's moving his hands all over control panels and stuff like that, sort of like in Monster Rancher, where they're just aimlessly
Just smashing buttons.
touching
Yeah,
shit.
whatever works.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Don't worry. There just needs to be a lever that just says open, because they do open it.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, what could possibly be in here?
And
Is
Van's
it
like,
another
oh, it's your
Zeke?
brother or sister.
Yeah.
It's got to be. It was right next to you. That's how these things
Right.
work. Yeah.
It's a smaller one, so it's got to, it's
Yeah.
got to be a younger brother or sister.
Yeah.
And they open it up, and it's just a woman.
Yeah, just a naked woman with a bunch of cables.
You see, I thought that you would get more excited because I knew that that's your dream come true, as you've mentioned, Dave. And you were just kind of like, matter of fact.
I was trying to tone it down. That's I got super
Oh,
excited
okay.
earlier. No, but it's interesting
Just-
because Sean and I actually watched a recording that had deleted scenes and alternate scenes, and this was
yeah.
this was one of them where it was like a close up of this woman that was a young woman, probably about Van's age, which makes it even more awkward. But kind of just like they really only show from like the neck up, and she's got like these weird like blue eyebrows.
Eyebrows.
over her-
Very
her
weird
eyes.
eyebrows.
So that's pretty much where the episode ends. They're just like, oh, okay, I guess we'll figure out what this is on the rest of the Chaotic Century series. And I thought it was great because it established Zeke and Van's relationship. It allowed them to have their first battle, which they were victorious in. And then it took that last few seconds to like open up all possibilities going forward into the rest of the
Right.
series. I thought it was great. I thought they did a great job
Yeah.
in the first episode. Yeah.
All of those beats that you just mentioned, Dave, and that little stinger at the end to open up the world of possibility.
Right.
We've talked about these in a lot of shows. Like that's in a first episode and a pilot that you're doing for a cartoon, just to really kind of shotgun that world and see what the potential is. That's paramount. We watch
Yeah.
so many cartoons that don't have that really restrict themselves with sort of the craziness that they have. And so this final twist at the end, it's a good thing to kind of, get you invested for the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, give me a reason to watch more than just like, okay, I like this
Yeah.
kid, I like these Zoids. It'll be cool to watch them
that
battle, I guess.
hoverboard.
But give me something
right.
else. And the hoverboard, which got
Yeah.
smashed, so he was
Oof.
pretty much fucked if he couldn't ride a Zoid out of there. So, but
Ah.
then, man, so that's the first episode. Now we jump 66 episodes later to the finale called "Return to Another Tomorrow," and I think this is actually the final act of like a 4-part finale because some shit
Right.
has been happening
Oof.
in this, right? So this is actually the finale of the second season, which is called Guardian Force. So that was a little confusing to me how it was Zoid's Chaotic Century, and then it shifted to Guardian Force because I guess from season 1 to season 2 they changed like the subhead or whatever. But
Right.
basically there's been this antagonist throughout the entire second series by the name of Hiltz, with a Z of course, Hiltz, who is one of these ancient Zoidians. He's one of the original inhabitants of Z, and he has taken it upon himself to exterminate pretty much all life forms on Z except for other Zoidians, which I'm assuming there's not very many of. So humans be gone, any Zoids and Organoids that ally with them be gone. And he has apparently amassed this great power in a Zoid that Sean mentioned earlier, the Death Soarer, right? This thing You've got to understand how we watched this first episode. We're like, all right, that's pretty cool. I can get into this. And then you watch the second episode, which opens with this giant like Mecha Godzilla thing that's bigger than skyscrapers, basically stomping through a city and just like laying waste to everything around it with laser blasts. And you're just like, oh fuck,
Ooh.
all right, well, let's gotta get reoriented here. Things have jumped up a few notches.
In my notes, I wrote the first line for this final episode. So much is happening right now.
I literally
so much is happening.
My first line is, "Whoa, things have really jumped up a few notches after 66 episodes." And obviously, guys, there's a lot we missed, and that's totally fine. I'm sure there's a lot of good episodes throughout the way, but we just wanted to see kind of where the arc ended up here. And I'm glad we watched this one because it's a crazy episode. You don't need to know a whole lot about what's going on to enjoy it, I don't think.
Because they really baby bird you through the whole thing.
Yeah, with names, thankfully.
Oh, God.
I mean, you've seen these people for 60-some episodes. You should probably know their names. But I'm glad because I didn't. So I'm glad whenever somebody else showed up, they were just like, oh, hey, it's that guy. Oh, it's Raven. Like,
it's Raven.
Thanks.
Great.
Now I know what a Raven is.
Hey, Van, you're the only pilot I've ever respected.
Everything about him is weird.
I bring up Van to point out, is there anything between these 66 episodes that you noticed in terms of character, appearance? Our main dude, our main guy, Van, he's doing stuff. He's got things going on. He seems a little bit different in this finale
He's
episode.
been hitting the gym is all I can say.
Oof, has he?
He's been hitting the gym and then going to the haberdasher to get a new wardrobe because he has left his dusty old sand rags behind and traded them in for a sweet, sweet new midriff.
He is wearing a midriff like it's nobody's business.
Like a champ.
With just abs popping.
But this bothers me. It's a 4-pack of ab. I don't. If you're gonna do
maybe because of his high-waisted pants.
I mean, I guess, but either like you've either got a low midriff or high-waisted pants. But if dude's been hitting the gym and he's got a 6-pack or something going on there, and you're only showing 4 of them, you're robbing the ladies of a show. I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And it's also just weird to like look at his stomach and just see like a weird plus sign. It looks like we're watching Adversarius again. Just like this bizarre design choice, but whatever, man. It's whatever.
Well, I don't know. You would think, I'm saying women's because the show is Zoids, and so everything should have a Z in it. So women's might be tuning into this show, trying to check out and see for Guardian Force what's going on with Van's abs.
Check out that 4-pack.
Check out that 4-pack. Mm-hmm. And so, I really feel like they're robbing women's or people who might be attracted to Van of that little bit of fan service.
I gotta tell you what, I was into hilts on this one.
His character design?
Holy shit!
Holy shit, was it fucking amazing?
And this is great because it's like this, like literally, Sean and I were just like thrown into this guy, like the introduction to this guy. So Hiltz was fairly like humanoid before. He just looked like a regular human guy. Very passable, is just like human. Your introduction to him in this episode is just like they only show him in like super close up, right? So from like head to maybe like mid chest down. He's surrounded by like crazy blue crystals that he's kind of like trapped in, and he's basically just like electric blue the entire time. And his face is just jacked up to like cocaine levels of just like wah! And he's just like electric, man. And I'm
here to party.
Oh man, he's here to just lay waste to everything. But he's just like an electric blue, like hedgehog hair, just like just live wire. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was completely insane. I was like, this guy's not fucking around. And and it went from there because they're basically all trying to stop him. He is piloting somewhere deep in the core of this Death Star. He's piloting this Megazoid, which, to dig in a little bit to the
Megazoid.
It's Megazoid. Did I just call it a Megazord?
You called it a Megazoid.
Nice, a Megazord.
Get those Power Rangers showing
That's
up.
That's right. This is basically like this thing has been resurrected. So the good guys have faced this monster before. They've faced it before. They defeated it, I believe, at the end of the first season by another like equally possessed crazy madman. But the difference is that Hiltz, he had a Zoid. And what was the name of his organoid again? Because he has an organoid as well. I believe it's Ambient.
Ambient.
Yeah, like the pharmaceutical drug. Just pop an Ambien.
He had an organoid just called Zoloft.
Just Zoloft. Just pop an Ambien. Just settle down, Hiltz. He needed an Ambien, to be honest with you. He was completely crazy. But so for most of Guardian Force, he had a Zoid. I almost said Guardian Voice. Because these fucking Zoids are getting to me. Organoids and Zoids. he had one called Death Stinger, right? And that was pretty
Right.
powerful too. But then that merged with this Death Sar into an even more powerful, crazy big Mega Zoid. And that is what is currently laying waste to this city.
And when we say that it's big,
Huge.
to give you some perspective in scale,
Yeah, maybe scale up from like
is,
what's a human to like a regular Zoid, because
I think like a Zoid is like if like a human, like you and I are around 6 foot.
Right.
You're taller than 6 foot. I'm
but
6 foot.
average,
So,
yeah.
but I think like a Zoid is anywhere between like the 10 to 12 foot range.
Yeah, think like
if
a tank, if not like a big, like one of those big mobile military like SWAT vehicles. It's probably fairly similar in size.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so this Death Star is roughly 20 to 30 times taller than
easy.
every other Zoid.
Easy.
Because they show at some point Death Star kind of like marching through the lines of the military, and one of them is not even like coming up to the top of its foot.
Right.
Like his giant talon that he has that's just crushing everything. And they're like up to maybe the scale of the top of one of these talons.
Right. So we are maybe like the
boy.
size of like his like toenail, his little pinky
Right.
toenail. And I love it too, because these guys are just like unloading, right? So you have the entire armed forces that is just unloading every available Zoid, every available bullet, laser shot, everything they can, just firing at this thing, like sometimes point blank. It's not doing shit. Everything is just, there's a crazy light show going on around him, but it's not affecting him whatsoever. And he's just mowing through people. And I love that they took the time to like watch, like to animate that, because he moves very slowly because he's so enormous. But I love the size of like the pistons and stuff for his legs. Like you actually get to see all the like the cool
the articulation and everything
the cool
that as he's
that work.
moving.
It's awesome. Because you just got to think, like, even in my mind, like the engineering of that, I'm like, that fucking piston must be like the size of a skyscraper itself. Like the thing is huge. So it was cool. Very cool design. Really nasty villain. And then this is sort of like Zoidian's last hope, or I guess the Z inhabitants' last hope, because they need to wipe this thing out, or he's got this mega like particle beam cannon that he weirdly shoots into the sky and then like somehow like
it refracts down.
He sent like a weird mirror into the sky, and then he could like spread out the lasers. I don't know what's going on here, guys, but it's crazy powerful and just wipes out a bunch of cities. So they really need to stop this guy.
And so, you know, we've talked about, you know, the proper way or the proper beats that you want to have in terms of a pilot episode to introduce you and get you excited about something. This show does everything right in terms of setting the stakes and having those proper beats to have the conclusion to a series as well. Yeah. And so if we're bookending this, they did a great job. We're not sure what's in the middle, but the two outside pieces of bread on this delicious sandwich, they're phenomenal.
These ain't no heels. These ain't no heels. This is good bread. This is that good bread.
Yeah, it's that good.
It's that
so
good.
So you know that good bread. So you know it's crazy because we have such high stakes. You have such a crazy villain who's just absolutely bent on destruction. The tools and the mechanisms that he's given is outlandish. It seems impossible to have anything combat and destroy him.
Unstoppable.
And he's on the verge of being able to destroy this. And
you mentioned stakes though too, so I want to set them up real quick. So Hilt and the Death Star, they basically want to wipe out everything except the Zoidians, like I said, right?
Right.
Now, can you tell me a little bit about Zoid Eve? Because that seems to be this other weird, sort of very powerful, but not quite in the same way, entity that we have here.
Right.
And how does she kind of come into play? Yeah.
So we have Zoid Eve, and it's interesting because we've mentioned, you know, sort of some of the outtakes or some of the clips, the alternate clips that we've had that were included in these episodes, in this first and this last episode. And one of the ones that they had, they really kind of just showed this. It's an enormous sort of statue of like a woman that's built into the side of a building, and you're not really sure. It's sort of, again, it kind of has like a little bit of kind of like a turquoise or green glow emanating from it. And you're led to believe this is a very powerful, this is maybe a very sacred object to these organoids, to these original inhabitants. And you see that inside is finally the naked woman that we saw from the first episode, whose named is Fiona. Exactly. Yeah. And so we have Fiona, and we have spilling his guts with Cable's Zeke hanging out on the inside, and they are sort of, I guess, kind of combating or at least taking ownership of Zoid Eve.
Yeah, I took it as like they kind of merged with her. So like Zeke weirdly merged with Fiona, which I don't really get what's going on there.
I don't get that either.
They both kind of merged with Zoid Eve, sort of.
Because does that mean that Fiona is a battery for Zeke and then Zeke is a battery for Eve?
I didn't really get that. I know that
It's
Fiona,
like Russian dolls of batteries.
Yeah, it's just Chevarushka, just stacked into each other. So I know that like throughout the entire series, Fiona keeps mentioning something about Zoid Eve, and it was really frustrating for me to try to like find out what was going on, because in every episode where she mentions it, she's either like knocked out and you don't find out what happens, or the person they're interrogating about what Zoid Eve is like executed right before they get in it. It's very frustrating. Yeah, just right on the head. So it's one of these things that you don't find out till probably just a few episodes from the end here. But what it is not just the Zoid itself, it's also this location that basically provides like a giant battery, this ancient force of energy to all Zoids on the planet. So it is like their lantern, right? For the Green Lantern Corps, it's like their lantern, their source of energy. So
sort of like their pulse, their heartbeat.
Yeah, exactly. Just their source. And if you snuff that
to
out,
make a human reference,
yeah, for those,
because Dave, look, not all of us are Green Lanterns, so if you want to keep holding over our head that you're a part of the Lantern Corps, that's fine. All right.
I was gonna say, for those humans out there, I wish I'd be Sinestro in a heartbeat, but basically, so now you've got, on one hand, you've got a guy that wants to basically commit genocide, wipe out a number of different species and life forms. And then on the other side, the armed forces are seeing that we're starting to lose the battle. So basically the general like looks around. They're like, there's no way we're going to stop this thing unless we snuff out Zoid Eve. Because if Zoid Eve goes down, the battery is drained for all Zoids, including Death Soarer. So they've now neutralized the threat. Now she brings that up because genocide on one hand, bad. Genocide on the other hand, supposedly good.
Supposedly okay.
So like that's a really heavy topic. And decision to make for ostensibly a kid's show about like fighting robot tigers. I was like really impressed that they went there, especially when some of the characters, I think the one who actually took her to task on it was a former villain who had kind of turned into an anti-hero by the end of this episode, which was really cool because he's like, are you sure that that's any better than the guy we're fighting against right now?
You talk about Raven?
I'll talk about Raven.
You talk about Raven and his raptor?
Raven the raptor.
Raptor Raven?
And his organoid shadow, I think.
Yeah.
Why not? So. Just a black dinosaur.
Right. Yeah. So we have them at this point, and the thing that's interesting is that you find out that Fiona and Zeke are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice in order to destroy Eve.
Yeah, I guess they're gonna like merge with her and then like
and shut her down.
Yeah, exactly. But which would include
drain that battery.
Yeah, just
yeah. So they're in the process, and this is the moment that we've discussed where like suddenly like Zeke sort of just like his chest opens up.
It was a really
and he's got like a
unexpected and like kind of disturbing moment. It just kind of came out of nowhere for me. It was just
like maybe it's happened in the other 60-something episodes, but this is the first time we saw it. So he sort of kind of like unloaded all of these tentacle wires and has now merged with Fiona.
Yeah, right into Fiona, which was like, I've seen this before and it's never ended well.
Yeah.
Not good for anyone.
Seen this on the internet and I wish I hadn't, but here we are again.
Keep coming back.
We get this. So we have this ultimate sacrifice that's ready to be made. Right. We have Raven calling her out on it, saying that's really not a good idea.
Right. You've got Fiona calling out to Hiltz too, just to be like, hey, guess what, fucker? We're going to take you down one way or the the Yeah, basically.
And he's like, no, don't do that. That'd be a really bad idea.
Yeah,
but they're at the point where they're stressed, they're taxed. The army has proven that they're not going to be able to handle this threat.
No, and like even at this point, like the Death Soarer has almost wiped out their giant mobile platform, like the Ultrasaurus, right? Like that thing is like basically just barely holding on.
And we should say that the Ultrasaurus has a weapon called a gravity cannon.
Right. Makes sense.
They've used. Makes total sense. That they've harnessed gravity into a cannon, and that this is and they've used this against this Deathsaurus, and so they are kind of, and it didn't work, and so they're
like, that's all we got.
They've pushed that, they've exercised that nuclear option and pressed that red button. And the result is what we see in almost every movie whenever somebody does something like that, with the smoke clears and the guy is still
Independence
standing
Day,
there. He's just like,
exactly.
yeah, exactly. Then just like, oh, no, we screwed this one up,
No,
didn't we, guys?
and at this point, the only two that look like they still have a chance at fighting him, which I found a little bit far-fetched, because it was basically Van and, the liger, the blade liger, and then Raven and his raptor Zoid were basically the only two standing against this giant thing. And the giant thing was basically like, he's just kind of like standing there, just like letting them fight. And I really like the fact that they gave Hiltz a line of dialogue that was basically explaining why those two were still alive. And I thought that was really cool. Do you remember that part?
Right. Yeah, he said, it's no coincidence that I've left you alive. I've left you alive till the final moment when I needed to drain your power.
Exactly. I thought that was awesome.
And then he opens up this giant vacuum cleaner in his chest that seems to it not only is a vacuum cleaner, but it also seems to drip sparkles at some point.
Sure.
And I was like, those are never going to come out.
No.
And so he opens up this giant vacuum cleaner and begins to kind of suck them in.
Basically merging or intending to merge with them like he did with the other two Zoids, I'm assuming. Yeah, and just give him ultimate power. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, he's going for this ultimate power option so that nobody can stop him. And he's like, these last two pilots, I'm going to integrate them into my power. I've left them alive, but now I'm going to teach them a lesson because they're the only two that are here. And I'm really going to show everybody else on Planet Z, y'all are fucked.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate badass thing to do. And keep in mind, he's doing this while he's screaming at the top of his lungs like crazy electric blue. I just want you to keep that image in your mind because it's insane. You can't not see it.
It's sort of it kind of reminded me for 2 seconds of moments of Akira.
Yeah, definitely.
Where he's inside of all of this massive energy.
Right.
And he's just going nuts.
Yeah.
He is drunk with this blue crystal power.
Yeah. Which was a drug in Cop.
Exactly.
Crystal twist.
Cops. So this is the moment where we've talked about these conversations that people have been having back and forth, being like, I'm going to do this thing. No, you're not. Is that really a good idea? And suddenly this is the moment where Van just goes, hey, Fiona, believe in me. And she's like, okay. Yeah,
it was super short, but also really cute at the same time because Fiona and Zeke are there and they're all weirdly attached to each other through cables. And Fiona's basically on the verge of tears and she's like, all right, we're ready to just exterminate an entire race, including ourselves probably. And then Van just somehow talks to her and he's like, nah, boo, I got this. She's like, aw. That's wait, what? It was kind of sweet, but also real goofy at the same time.
Because the next thing that he does is he calls up the Ultrasaurus and he's like, hey guys, is the gravity cannon still online? And they're like, yup. He's like, shoot me out of the gravity cannon.
This is at this point, you're just well, I guess, all right, sure. At first blush, it sounds really kind of silly. But the way that they paint it, I thought was really cool because it was Van's basically saying yeah, me and the Liger, we'll either handle it or we won't. And they're basically saying to him, they're like, you realize that we're going to launch you at this thing and you're either going to blast through it and save the day, or you're just going to splatter on its armor like a bug on a windshield, right? And he's like, don't worry about it. I got it. And
don't worry about it, boo.
No.
I got this.
And I like that because it was I think he knew somewhere deep down, Van knew that this was it. It was either going to work or it wouldn't, but either way, he was
right.
He had one shot. That was it.
Again, we have two people willing to sacrifice themselves, for the good of everything. And, we have one option which will work,
right, but
at the cost of a lot of other, Organoid and Zoid lives. And then we have we have a crazy, Van, who's
insane.
He's Van, who's like, hey, can you guys turn me into a liger bullet?
Yeah, he's just shoot us out of that cannon.
Shoot me out of a cannon.
Yeah. And I love, so I'd want to make a nod to this character named Moon Bay, who she only stuck in my mind because she's randomly there. I don't know. I'm sure she has a lot to do in the rest of the episode, but she's the entire time in this episode, she's just struggling to keep this Ultrasaurus steady. So she's literally just fighting with joysticks to keep the thing standing on its 4 legs or whatever it has left. And it was just odd. So she's there. She's struggling to keep this thing right. Van is going to get into the gravity cannon. This all sounds completely insane. But then, right, Hilt sees what they're planning to do. So he sees what they're doing. So he now goes on the defensive and he fires up this crazy light shield. So this energy shield.
Right.
And he sets that up, and you're like, well, fuck, now what's going to happen? And this is where that kid Raven comes back into play. And he basically, yeah.
This is now my absolute favorite part of the entire episode, because you see this point where Raven's raptor jumps at the top of a building, and on the back of the legs, there's like these counterweights that just go.
Yeah, there's like anchors that like dig into the rock.
Right.
Yeah.
So they hunker down, and he's like, I'm going to create a hole in this energy field for you. So get ready, Van. I'm going to do it right now. So he starts unloading all of this weaponry, all of these guns, all of this stuff. And Hilt is just kind of like, oh no, like, what are you doing? Yeah. Like, oh, like this is the first time that he honestly seems a little bit surprised about what's going on. And so then in this moment where Raven has exhausted all of his options on his raptor, now remind you, it's anchored into the side of the building. He gets done unloading, and then the raptor just goes, nah, I'm done, and just falls off the building. Just falls off
because he's completely like exhausted at that point.
Like, it's anchored in there, so it shouldn't be a problem, but it just kind of, it's sort of like it just ragdolls off the building.
It's like no bones.
It just completely falls. I'm like, oh, he's probably dead.
He's probably real dead.
Raven's dead.
But he's alive enough to watch his own organoid shadow come flying in from nowhere and just like blasts the final hole in the shield of the Death Soarer, right? So as this is all happening, you kind of got to keep all these wheels spinning at the same time. As that's happening, Raven's falling in his boneless ragdoll of a Zoid. Shadow's flying in and blasting this final hole in the Death Soarer's shield. Moonbay is struggling to keep this Ultrasaurus steady. Van and his liger are currently sitting in the gravity cannon, getting ready to be shot out of it like a liger bullet. And Zeke and Fiona are standing by in case they have to like eliminate Zoid Eve. So there's a lot of shit going on at one time. And meanwhile, there's all these like impotent generals and soldiers and stuff behind them. Like, oh, is it going to work, or are we all like dead? Let's see what happens. And it's cool because they like cheer him on. They're like, you can do it, Van. You're the only one. You're the best guy. I'll suck your D. Like, there's lots of like weird just like stuff. I don't know. Maybe they said that.
Maybe I missed that.
Yeah, I don't know. There's an alternate scene. So it's cool though. What I'm trying to say is like they do build up that energy and like that final moment. And you're like, all right, this is it. And then they launch the fucker out of there. And as he's going, and he has that like cool corona of light and stuff that's in front of him, makes him look like he's going super fast, and he's like, burning through the atmosphere.
Right.
At this point,
like parts of his liger are kind of like falling apart.
Well, not yet. It's not until so Hiltz at this point, he's like, oh, I see, and he fires his own beam cannon again. This like super powerful thing that's been wiping out cities. He fires that directly at the liger, at Van and the liger. So that's when, parts of the armor start like flying off and like disintegrating, and he's basically down to just like base metal. But he manages to just punch through it anyway, because in a really cool moment, Van has kind of waited till the last second, and the Death Soarer has exhausted its particle beam, and the liger's still coming. And Van's like, now it's my turn, and he just like throttles up and just punches through this thing. And it was such a cool moment that you knew was kind of going to happen, but you weren't quite sure.
Of course.
Because if he would have just splattered on the side of that thing, that would have been like a real letdown. But no,
there was a part of me that was like, fingers crossed. I was like,
let's see what happens.
I want to see the villain win this time, just this one.
Well, because they still could have just neutralized Zoid Eve, and they still would have been like, well, all right, we lost Van, but at least we'll shut you down. Yeah, but they didn't. So Van saves the day. He busts through this thing. It literally like took the next 5 or 10 minutes to slowly like stumble, collapse, fall down, eventually explode, eventually collapse the entire city upon it.
Which, you know that there's a threat and a villain that is worthy when you have to collapse an entire, not just like a city block.
No. Like,
not just like a small, like you watch as the liger is running away, the whole city just folds in on itself and presumably on top of this Death Soarer.
Oh, definitely on top of the Death Soarer, which included like Zoid Eve too. Because
it had one moment where the Death Star is like laying on the ground and a building just goes
right on his face,
on top of its head.
Amidst all the explosions, I was like, no, okay, he's dead. Yeah.
I'm watching the episode with a friend of the show, Melanie Harker, and in that moment where that building drops, that's the first time she laughed. Like during the entire, she goes, ah!
It was like, hilarious. It smashed him right in the face. He literally just dropped a building on a Godzilla face. It was satisfying though. It was very satisfying. And I have to say, I think one of the reasons that made it more satisfying. Not so much that I loved like Van as like a hero, because I didn't get to see enough of him being heroic. I think he's a great hero, don't get me wrong. I just didn't get to see enough of him to form that bond. But I did get to see enough of Hiltz being a batshit crazy genocidal lunatic.
Oh, that was great.
I mean, he has a great line where he's screaming at the top of his lungs and he's like, "Don't resist the inevitable, join the annihilation." And I'm just like, fuck yeah, this guy's got it.
You know, he is almost like a you don't know whether or not as a villain he still possesses any humanity whatsoever because of these blue crystals that he's surrounded in. So he is psychotic. They have thrown everything at him. He has beat back everything consistently.
Right.
He gets to that final point where he spits in the face of the two heroes and says, "Oh, I'm going to consume you with this death sore vacuum cleaner." And everything that they're throwing at him at this point, every obstacle, you know, that he is throwing out there, they are barely making it pass until they exercise this liger bullet. And even in that instance, like you said, you think to yourself, is the Death Star like beam going to knock the liger out of the sky?
Real close.
Because I'll be honest, real life physics would tell me that if you have two forces colliding at that point, it's gonna knock one of them out. Like if one's not traveling fast enough, that's how speed and like velocity work.
I'll say we don't know what the physics are like on the planet Z, so maybe, you know, gravity versus particle beam cannon. Ooh, I don't know. Ooh, it's a fuzzy math.
I love the idea that like fuzzy math and fuzzy science just gets a.
It's just cartoon physics. I'm totally cool with it.
It's good. Yeah.
Look, man, if that liger was gonna punch all the way through that like crazy plates of armor of basically a walking city, like there was nothing gonna stop him. Nothing gonna stop him.
Right.
But I dug it, man. Even like the only thing at the end that's like a finale of 67 episodes. The thing is, they like the Death Star blows up, and that's it. It's like the end of the episode. So roll credits, and roll credits is when like Zeke and Fiona, I think, like weirdly teleport over to Van, and then they like run off into the sunset, and then they just like meet up with everybody out in the desert again and just like hug, and everybody's cool. And it's like, I mean, I guess
they do that thing where they line up everybody for sort of like a picture
for like,
like a final
a cameraman who's not actually there. It's just the audience, they're the viewer. Yeah.
Well, you know, I figured whenever they were taking the photo, because Raven's out there with them, you know, now at this point, but Raven was not in that final. I don't believe Raven was in that final photo. I feel like he was the person that they're like, "Hey, Raven, would you, since you're kind of an anti-hero and sort of a piece of shit, could you do us a favor and just take this photo of all the people who were actually good from the beginning?"
That's right. We were drawn that way. This is before selfies too, so they couldn't have just taken a giant Zoid selfie.
Do you think that there's like a Zoid attachment that's a selfie stick?
I would imagine that there is. You know what? Just take one of those stupid Judge's robot arms and just use that as like a selfie stick. Those stupid things. I'm so glad that we watched Chaotic Century though, because this was a show that I would have loved if I had actually watched it when it was on at the time.
I agree.
It's another one I might go back and actually watch a little bit more of if I had the time. Yeah, so you like it too?
We should throw this out there that a majority of this series is available on Dailymotion.
Yeah. With alternate deleted scenes, which are probably cut from the Japanese versions by American censors due to weird tentacle stuff going on.
Yep.
Yeah, so if that's your thing, check it out.
Weird moments where they almost made Dave's dreams come true.
Almost, so close. Thanks, Japan. You guys are the best.
So you would definitely recommend this show?
Oh, absolutely. I would say don't bother with the New Century stuff unless you're into like the model kits and stuff like that. That I get, because that's kind of cool to see the different versions of the Liger. But for the actual like action and storytelling and the characters, definitely check out Chaotic Century and Guardian Force. Looks really cool.
Cool.
How about you, buddy?
Yeah, I definitely recommend this. I was glad that we did this. I think that this also might be one of the first times that we've watched first and last episodes.
Yeah, it's something we might get into. What we try to do is find like a highly rated one, or if it's recommended from a friend, then we go with that recommendation. But for some of these, it's hard to find like a list of like ratings of episodes unless it's like a major show. So we might do that in the future, just kind of bookend it and see how that works out.
So this was, you know, as a first time trying it out, it was great. I loved seeing sort of the arc and the abs, you know, that come out over 60-something episodes. And so that's great. You know, I would definitely recommend this, as you mentioned, over top of New Century.
Yeah, and you said that we had some listeners out there from Facebook land to kind of thank for our listener suggestion because of a response to our previous episode. Yeah.
So we received a very high response, and as we mentioned before, you guys had a lot of opinions about Zoids, and so this was the reason that we got into Chaotic Century and wanted to watch it based on your user suggestions and reviews. I will have to go back and see if I can find the person to credit for this, but I will say that I asked somebody on Facebook, what episode would you recommend as a way to sort of get into the series and dip my toe into a little bit of this chaos that's going to happen in this version of Zoids? And the person's response was priceless because they just said, I'd watch all of them.
It's like, oh,
so priceless.
So 34 hours of Zoid's Chaotic Century straight. I would love to someday just do like a crazy marathon of something.
We're going to do it one day. We're going to do our Land Before Time marathon.
Oh, God, they're still making more of those. They're actually coming out with the full collection on Blu-ray in like June, I think.
Ooh, fingers crossed.
$250, yeah.
Oh, your birthday's coming
up. I'll send that shit right back. I'll do it for charity. It's the only way I'm doing it. Not for sanity, for sure.
I would agree. Yeah, there's no sanity involved in this one.
But no, so thanks again, listeners out there. Let us know, like we said, if you liked our coverage of Zoid's Chaotic Century, if you have any other suggestions for us to cover in the future, because we will definitely be doing that. And then listen to the end of this episode, because we're going to tell you what's coming up next on Saturday Morning Cartoons. We've got some more listener suggestions, some of which might surprise you. But before that, Sean, buddy, what do you have going in the next couple of weeks that you might want to let the listeners know about out there?
I'm going to be performing with Washington Improv Theater. As always, I perform with the troupe that does live improv comedy that's called Nox. That's NOX ! You can find out about any of the shows that we have if you check out witdc.org. And as always, you can find me on the Turs and the Grams at Sean Paul Ellis.
Wonderful. For me, you can find me over at collider.com. You can also find me on nerdist.com. And if you're interested in checking out some of my short fiction, you can do so at davetrumbore.com. On Twitter, you can find me at drclawmd. If you want to know more about Saturday Morning Cartoons, you can do so at our website, SaturdayMorningCartoons.com. Remember, that's morning with a U. Also, check out Sean's handiwork on our Tumblr page, SaturdayMorningCartoons.tumblr.com. You guys know all about our Facebook page because you have been so great at getting back to us, liking our images, our theme songs that we post, and obviously our episodes too. So thanks so much again for checking that page out. You can also listen to our podcast episodes each and every week on our YouTube account. Or if you prefer audio only, you can listen to them for free through iTunes and Stitcher. Also, if you have listener suggestions, you can either reach out to us through Facebook, or if you want, send us an email, SaturdayMorningCartoons@gmail.com. That's going to do it for Zoid's Chaotic Century. However, we've got another couple of listener requests that are coming up. I don't know anything about this next one.
I don't know anything about this next one either, but for our next episode, we are going to be watching and discussing JoJo's Bizarre Adventure.
And we got to go back and dig up who suggested this one. It was very recent. We will definitely be shouting out to you on that episode. So if it's you and you're listening, please let us know which episode you'd like us to watch. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. And then we've also got coming down the pipe, we've got, should we tell them about the next ones?
Yeah, we should tell them about the next one.
So the one after that, I'm super looking forward to. I don't know which episode we're going to cover either. Was this a listener suggestion?
I think I might just watch all 26
I mean, that's totally fine too. And we'll argue about which one's our favorite for an hour and a half.
Oh, God. Anyone with Faye Valentine.
I mean, obviously. So that should give it away right there. I'd kind of love to watch Pierrot Le Fou. That's one of my favorite ones. It scares the shit out of Allison, which I find hilarious.
Really?
He's terrifying.
He's pretty terrifying.
So obviously we're talking Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop, one of the best, one of the greats.
One of the best.
All-time greats. Speaking of, it's going to lead into one of the all-time greats. We're going to have a 2-part episode for our 99th and 100th episode of the podcast. We're going to be talking about probably the granddaddy of all cartoons, Batman the Animated Series.
Can't wait.
Batman the Animated Series. I don't know how we're going to top that with episode number 200 if we survive that long. But we're not looking that far ahead. We're looking at Batman the Animated Series. We got some cool stuff coming up. We've got a number of guests that have been on the show in the past that are going to be lending their voices to this episode,
making some cameo appearances during episode 99 and 100. So I'm very excited to have them.
Yeah, we're going to try to hit up a lot of your favorite villains from the series, as well as some of the Batman's best moments. So it's going to be good. I'm looking forward to that one. That's something I definitely want to dig back into a little bit. So this gave me a good excuse and reason to do it. So Yeah, stuff to look forward to the next few weeks on Saturday morning cartoons. But until then, I just want to say thank you guys for listening, and we will see you next time.